Hey everyone, it's Peter from Daydream Nation, and Merry Christmas to Bicyclelegs. How are you?
Merry Christmas to you, Peter. I'm wonderful.
Fantastic. We're doing a special Christmas show where we're going back in time to the year 1983, December, in fact, and we are going to do a little bit of a retro review of the top 10 singles in December, UK, US, Australia, and we might put a little bit of a sneaky top five albums from Kerrang magazine, which was a metal magazine from 1983. So without further ado, maybe we'll go to the US charts and we'll
Yep.
take it in turns, count down from 10 to 1. I'll start things off. Let's go to the US top 10. Number 10 was Church of the Poison Mind by Culture Club. So, were you a Culture Club fan, Bicycle
Yeah, I
Legs?
was actually.
Yeah.
This is going to be interesting because, obviously I've looked ahead at all three charts. Is a Culture Club song on each chart, and it's a different song.
Yes.
So it just goes to show how back in the sort of pre-internet days, often, different territories would be ahead or behind of other territories. And Church of the Poison Mind was actually the first single on Color by Numbers, which was their second album. And yeah, it's a great song. Really, really like it. Yeah, I love Culture Club, especially those first two or three albums. I think they're great.
Not a huge fan, but I do appreciate that there's a bit of a Northern Soul feel to this song. It's got a bit of a retro feel. I think Helen Terry, who was the backup singer, was a little bit front and center on this particular song. Look, no denying Boy George has got a colourful, unique voice. Those first, I mean, there were a couple of decent pop tracks in those first couple of albums, but I'm not a huge fan. But if I had to be pushed in what's a decent Culture Club song, this is definitely a Church of the Poison Mind. So that's number
Yeah.
10. All right,
So
over to
yeah.
you.
Okay, number nine is Crumbling Down by John Cougar Mellencamp, as he just switched over from being John Cougar to being John Cougar Mellencamp at this point. This was off I can't remember the name of the album, but
Aha.
it was the one that came after his big breakthrough.
Yeah, I think it was called Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
know the one.
yeah.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this song?
I think it's got a very Stonesy feel to it. I could imagine Jagger playing this. It's very stripped back. Lyrically, it's quite interesting. It's a bit of a political song, so it's a bit of a Trojan horse. He wanted to write a pseudo protest song, and it was a little bit of a protest at what was happening in the political landscape in 1983. So John Cougar was morphing from being a pop star or a pin-up pop star into something a little bit more of the Springsteen, and this song was definitely flagging that transition. But I like it. It's stripped back, it's bluesy, and I can imagine the Stones doing it. What do you think of this
Yeah,
track?
I definitely think this album is where John Cougar Mellencamp or John Mellencamp or whatever he wants to go by is coming into his own, actually becoming the artist he wants to be rather than the artist that his record company wants him to be. And he'd had the breakthrough with, Hurt So Good and Jack and Diane, those two huge singles off the last album. He felt like he was more in a position to say, right, now this is what I want to do. And that's what I really feel with this song. I agree with you. This is real sort of heartland rock. Um, Great song. Really, really up tempo, catchy. Love it. Really good song.
Yeah, and people kind of forget that he was giving Springsteen a run for his money. He was quite big for, I think in that period, 86, 87, he was quite huge. Scarecrow, that was the big album. And he was certainly, you know, generating a lot of heat. But yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. It's a good song. Okay, now we go to number 8, and this is Come On Feel the Noise by Quiet Riot, which is a remake of an old Slade song. This was off the Metal Health album, which was the first heavy metal album to go #1 in America. What do you think of this song?
Yeah, it's interesting because this is actually, I think Metal Health was quite right. It's third album, but it was the first album that got released outside of Japan. Like the first two albums only got released in Japan with the late great Randy Rhoads on board.
Mm.
But this is a rave up. I mean, the original Slade track is a rave up too. It's a lot of fun. There's no great substance to this song, but it's a good, fun, heavy song. You know, sing along when you've had a few beers and that sort of thing.
I'm going to be contrarian. I like it. I prefer it better to the Slade version.
Mm.
Yeah, I just think it's got better production. I like Kevin DeBrow's singing, and you got to say Kevin DeBrow is probably the chip off Noddy's block. He's in that sort of got that leathery sort of vocal tonality. But yeah, all round, I like it. It always brings a smile to my face, and it is a rave up. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of mindless, but yeah, it's a really, really enjoyable song. So I've got no qualms about this one. Come
Yeah,
on, feel the noise at
it's
#8.
it's the sort of song that always goes over well at a party, I think.
Absolutely. A jukebox staple.
All
Okay,
right.
over to
So,
you.
so at number 7, we've got Union of the Snake by Duran Duran. So Duran Duran were, one of the biggest bands on the planet in 1983. They'd had two massive albums. This is off the third one. What are your thoughts on Duran Duran? You a fan or not
Oh,
really?
huge fan. Love those albums. I think they're very underrated still, even though they got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There is still a lot of the musical snob press that look down upon them as a bit of a pop band, but musically they had game. You know, you've got the bottom end of Taylor. You've got the three Taylor brothers. I say brothers, but they're not actually brothers. They're not
Mm.
related. I always think that's just so weird. You've got the charismatic Simon Le Bon. You've got Nick Rhodes. I just think that they had just wonderful pop smarts. They morphed into something different around Notorious, the Nile Rodgers produced album, and became more adult contemporary funk. And now, in the last 20 years or so, they've been quite experimental. Red Carpet Massacre is an example where they're um, having collaborations with Timberlake. They're always looking at what's happening in the charts or what's, happening in music and just pushing the edges. But getting back on track with Union of the Snake, this is just a funk workout. Probably not my favorite Duran Duran song, but it's got enough pop smarts to bring a smile to your face, and it's quite enjoyable.
Mm. I actually feel like this song and the album like Seven and the Ragged Tiger is where they're starting to branch out. Like those first two albums are pure pop, new wave,
Yes.
new romantic. Union of the Snake is starting to get a bit atmospheric and a bit,
Mm,
darker sounding. And I
yep.
like that about it. So you can see that they're itching to get away from those first two albums and start being a little bit more experimental. Maybe it's not quite the right word, but just a little more interesting and venture away from that pure sort of teeny pop, which I love. I love that those early Duran Duran albums, but
Yeah.
it's nice to see them going in a slightly different direction with this song.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of Duran Duran? I think me personally, I always love the bass lines, the wonderful fat bass lines of Taylor. It's
Mm.
just I just love it. What is there any particular part of Duran Duran that you always gravitate to sonically?
I've always been a bit of a Nick Rhodes fan. I'm like his atmospheric keyboard playing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a sucker for keyboard players, so
And he looks cool, doesn't he? He's always been
yes,
the more sartorially best dressed in the band, and
yeah.
not that they dress shabby. Union of the Snake. One more final word. I think this probably laid the cobblestones for Wild Boys, which
Yes.
was at the time very experimental. A lot of people were sort of scratching their heads and saying, "Do I like this song?" I think this really laid the foundation for that.
Yeah.
All right. Islands in the Stream. Kenny Rogers with Dolly Parton. Over to you.
Uh, this song was the bane of my existence in 1983 because you couldn't escape it. It was everywhere. I mean, I think at number 6 on the US charts, I would be, I think, pretty right in saying this was on its way down because it had been number 1 everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I think this is on the way back down from being at number 1. Um, yeah, it was an inescapable song. I am a huge fan of the Brothers Gibb, the Bee Gees. I think they were some of the best songwriters there's ever been. This song, though, no, it doesn't do it for me. It's just a bit too cheesy, especially with. I've never been a huge. I love Dolly Parton, but I've never been a huge Kenny Rogers fan. So yeah, this song, yeah, I think I've still got cringe from hearing it 3 million times in 1983. It's a song I never ever need to hear again.
It's a karaoke staple.
Yeah.
All right. Number 5. So I'm just carrying.
All right.
Love is a Battlefield.
Yeah. Love is a Battlefield. Pat Benatar. Um, I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, I like this song. I like it a lot, but I don't like the film clip. The
Mm.
film clip is terrible. If there was ever a film clip that did a disservice to the song, just for people who haven't seen the film clip, Pat Benatar plays a hooker, you could say, and she's got a group of other call girls, and she's looking to have a bit of girl power and break away from the pimp. There's all these different things that happen in the film clip, and there's one scene where she gets a glass of water and she sort of throws it at the pimp, and then she goes into this ridiculous dance routine, which I'm gonna hazard a guess. I bet Paula Abdul probably had something to do with it because she had her fingerprints. It's either Tony Basil or Paula Abdul. So I haven't done the research, but I'm just putting a bet. People research that, and she does this sort of dance, and it was very much like Michael Jackson. And you see, I'm talking more about the video because
Yeah.
video was the syntax of our lives in that time, wasn't it?
Oh,
Where
absolutely.
if we're in the schoolyard having a yak about the song, we'd be probably talking more about the video than the actual song. But now we're talking about the song. I'm blabbing on. What do you think of this?
I think it's a great song. I do agree it's not a great clip. I will absolutely back you up that if one of between Tony Basil and Paula Abdul did the choreography, that it would be Paula Abdul. I think Tony Basil is a much more interesting and experimental choreographer than Paula Abdul. And the dance moves in this song are just, yeah,
It's
they're
just
very
ridiculous.
80s and horrible.
Yeah, but it just sort of trivializes the women's movement, sort of like,
Yeah,
okay, just throw water at your pimp and do a bit of a shimmy and everything will be right. It just sort of trivializes and just sets the women's movement back 20 years.
yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
and the actual song is quite empowering, the lyric, you
Yes.
know. But it's a really good song. To me, this is a song that really sort of straddles the two sort of Pat Benatar sounds. You have, you get the rock Pat Benatar and you get the sort of synth pop Pat Benatar. And to me,
Mm,
this song really kind of straddles those two sounds. And I think
yeah,
it's one of her most successful singles.
it is. And I think the other side of this particular single, she wasn't as interesting. There was some poppy pap that she came out like "We Belong." I didn't like that. All Fired Up. I think she made a sort of a return to rock with that single. I'm just thinking of the singles that charted in Australia, but I
Mm.
think I like her early material where it was really rock, very direct. She was a little bit of a pioneer, but I think the other side of this single, in my book, she went on a bit of a downward slide anyway.
Just don't let Jamie Laszlo hear you speaking ill of Pat Benatar.
It is what it is. It is what it is. Okay.
All right. So number 4, "Say It Isn't So" by Daryl Hall and John Oates.
I love Hall and Oates, and I don't have any complaints about this song. I think they're one of the great soul duos of all time. But we're getting to the end of their glory period. 1984, I think after 1984, that was it. They sort of their hits sort of dried up. But Lord, gee whiz, did they have a great run of singles between 1980 and 84? And
Yeah.
this is one of them.
Well, absolutely. I think 84 was probably their biggest year because that was when Big Band Boom came out and had Out of Touch on it and Method of Modern Love and those things. And that's probably my favorite Hall & Oates album. I adore that album. It's
Yeah, it's a bit
one of the albums
overproduced. It's a bit
yeah,
overproduced.
it's one
I've
of
got
the
that.
albums I bought as a kid. So I have that
I
special
know.
connection with it.
That's the problem that we always have. Entry Point always has that, adds that rose-colored glasses element to it. I've got
Yeah.
that album too. In fact, I've got a ton of their albums, and even their early albums. Folks, you've got to check it out. There's a lot of Americana. They sound very Bob Dylan. It's interesting, but I
Mm.
just think that 78 to 84, when they had that run of hits and they were very much in the soul, like Private Eyes, as an example, um, yeah, they
Yeah.
were kind of untouchable.
But this song, really soulful song. And it's got a beautiful, the chorus, the melody in the chorus absolutely suckers me in every time. You get the say it isn't so, and then say it isn't so.
Hmm.
It goes into that minor sort of key
It
thing.
isn't
Abs-
so.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. I'm a sucker for that sort of thing in a song, and they do it brilliantly.
yeah. And a very famous partnership that aren't really friends. So
Mm,
it's a bit of a folks, you see a lot of these bands and you think, gee, they're close. Like those Everly Brothers, gee, they got on, but in reality, it's not. And there's a real nasty lawsuit occurring between both of them. And say it isn't so, Bicyclelegs. Let's hope
yeah,
they work it out.
yeah,
But yeah, they're one of the all-time great duos, and I've got no complaints about this. A very deserved number four.
yeah.
All right. This song was just played to death on pop radio, and to this very day, greatest hits and memories radio stations all around Australia, and probably America and UK play this song, and that's Uptown Girl by Billy Joel. What
Mm.
do you think of this song?
Okay, this is a song you couldn't escape in 1983. But unlike Islands in the Stream, I can still listen to this song and have a blast of a time. Again, this album for me, the Innocent Man album, is one of my favorite Billy Joel albums because it's an album I grew up with. 12, 13 years old. Uh, I love Uptown Girl. It's a bit of cheese, but I love it. It's a very nice flavored cheese for me.
Yeah, I loved it at the time, but I don't like it so much now. I think it is a bit cheesy and a bit dated. And to me, I like Billy Joel, the new wave Billy Joel. He's my Billy Joel, where he did Glass Houses. That particular era, late 70s, is the my perfect spot in respect of his music. This song, what is he doing? He's playing a bit of a homage to Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. It's got a lot of charm. I mean, it had Christy Brinkley in the film clip. Yeah, I loved it in the day, but it's just one of those songs that over time, maybe it's because it's been so overplayed, I don't like it as much. I've just sort of fallen out of love with it.
Yeah.
And in fact, that album, the other songs on the album, An Innocent Man, I don't like that song as much. Tell Her About It. No, I gravitate to Glass Houses and, even further the early stuff. But yeah, I'm not so fussed on Innocent Man.
Yeah, no, fair
Anyway,
enough. So number two on the US charts in December 1983 was All Night Long by Lionel Richie.
it's inoffensive. It's a song that I don't mind, but I don't love. But I feel like it's been around me forever. How do you feel about it? I can't really explain any more
Mm,
than that. I'm not a big fan of Lionel Richie.
yeah,
Probably if I was going to go to Lionel Richie, I'd probably go to the Commodores. They made some really decent R&B soul albums.
mm,
I'd probably go to that before I'd go to Lionel Richie.
yep. Look, I'm not a Lionel Richie fan either. But if I have to listen to Lionel Richie, All Night Long is as good as any other Lionel Richie solo song, as far as I'm concerned. At least it's got a nice sort of slink to it. It's got a bit of funk to it in the choruses. The verses are kind of more mellow. He sings the song well, but it's definitely a lot better than some of the other, like Dancing on the Ceiling or Hello or things like that, which no, just I'm not interested in any of that. But All Night Long, if that comes on the radio, yeah, I don't mind it at all.
Well said. All right. Well, with number
Number
one,
one on the
oh,
US charts, Paul
Paul
McCartney and
McCartney
Michael
and Michael
Jackson
Jackson.
with Say, Say, Say.
Yes. Well, Macca, I love you, but I don't like these duets that you would. It's not the worst duet. The one he did with Stevie Wonder was the Nadir, Ebony and Ivory. But yeah, I don't think this is a very good song in any shape or form. And Paul was shamelessly going for the pop market, the younger pop market, and Michael Jackson was red hot,
Yeah.
so got on the wagon. I don't think it's a particularly great song, and to be quite frank, I think Mac is a little bit awkward on this. I don't think it's quite in his wheelhouse. It's just a very awkward performance. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, I mean, I prefer it over, say, The Girl Is Mine, which I think is just the cheesiest of cheesy.
Hmm.
Can you believe that Michael Jackson had the album Thriller and it had songs like Beat It and Billie Jean and Wanna Be Starting Something on it? And the first single he releases off it is The Girl Is Mine.
Hmm.
What was he thinking?
Was that
But
him or was it the record company?
well, that's a good question too. I don't
Hmm.
mind Say Say Say. It's not prime Paul McCartney or prime
Hmm.
Michael Jackson for that matter, but it's a fun little song. I
Yeah.
don't mind it. It's I mean, the whole Pipes of Peace album is kind of offcuts from recording Tug of War, which I think is a far superior album, except for the aforementioned Ebony and Ivory, which is the only song on Tug of War that I don't like. Everything else on that album I think is brilliant. But a lot of the songs on Pipes of Peace were sort of offcuts and leftovers from the Tug of War sessions.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is as good as anything else on that album. But that album, I mean, I did a top 10 Paul McCartney albums on my channel ages ago, and Tug of War was right up towards the top, and Pipes of Peace didn't make the top 10 at all. So,
Yeah, I think Pipes of Peace would be way down in my list. But anyway, maybe over time, like I'm a little bit contrarian. I think McCartney 3 is actually brilliant, but there's been a lot of social media lately that, you know, there's a bit of controversy because Mac has been re-releasing McCartney 3 as a remix or rebooting it or doing some bells and whistles. And I've just been seeing a lot of social media on my feed saying how bad this album is, but I love it. But who am I to judge? Putting you on the spot, out of the 10, casting your eyes, what song, when you were looking it up and down, is what's Bicyclelegs pick? What's your favorite song of the 10?
ooh, that's a tough choice.
That's why I'm putting you on the
Um,
spot.
it might be a toss up between Say It Isn't So and Crumbling Down. I think both of those are top songs.
I'm going to pick Crumbling Down. I think that surprised me how energetic and alive and very now that and timeless that song sounded. All right, thanks for that. So let's go over to the UK and we'll go to the top 10. And warning, folks, whew, there's some interesting ones in this one.
Mm.
The UK are very much about Christmassy songs, novelty songs. So there's a bit to get through here, a bit to unpack. So I'll start things off with Cliff Richard, or as he's well known now as Sir Cliff Richard, and Please Don't Fall in Love. Over to you.
Okay, well, this is one of a couple of songs on this top 10 that I had to go and listen to because I don't remember it back in the day because it didn't make an impact here in Australia at all. And listening to it, I can totally understand why it didn't because it is just Cliff Richard is known for doing real sort of schlocky songs, and this is the schlockiest of the schlock. It's just really sentimental and saccharine and just no.
Tepid.
Mm,
It's
it's terrible.
it's like a limp iceberg lettuce in a salad bowl. It's that
Mm,
bad. It's terrible. It was a struggle to get through the film clip. I bet you felt the same.
yeah.
It's just got no edge. And, there was one or two songs when I was a kid that I actually didn't mind Cliff Richard. And we were sort of exchanging messages. And you
Mm,
said that you were kind of had a guilty pleasure with Wired for Sound.
love that song.
And I had a bit of a soft spot. We don't talk anymore. I
Mm.
actually listened to both songs, and I don't like those anymore either. I just sort of like with 2023 years, there's just no edge. It's
Yeah.
just yeah. Cliff Richards for the folk in America was a bit of a rock idol or a pop idol, and he goes back to the Beatles in the 60s. He's had hits in the UK over 5 or 6 decades. I think he holds the record for having a number one over that period of time.
Mm.
Um, he fronted a band called The Shadows, which were a great guitar band. And yeah, that's probably about it. I've got nothing much more to
Yeah.
add.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean, Cliff Richard actually predated the Beatles. And his really early stuff was proper sort of late 50s rock and roll. In fact, um, John Lennon once said that the first proper British rock record was Move It by Cliff Richard and the Shadows. He said
mm,
before that, there'd been nothing in the UK.
I mean, Shadows had the wonderful Hank Marvin, and there are so many guitarists, like even Richie Blackmore, if they cite their influences, they always go back to Hank Marvin. It was very melodic. It was that surf rock type of guitar sound. But yeah, Cliff Richards, how would I sort of say? Maybe he was regarded as the UK's answer to Elvis, but
Mm,
with not the edge.
yes.
So, and it was a running joke that Cliff Richards always looked young.
Mm,
Even in the 80s and the 90s. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
he always looked young. But this song's terrible.
Yeah. No, Cliff Richard
Um,
always looked young until he very suddenly didn't.
Yes, absolutely. Look, I wouldn't even give this to my auntie at on Mother's Day. It's that bad.
No.
No, I wouldn't give it to my enemy. All
All
right.
right.
Over to
So
you.
number nine, Tina Turner with Let's Stay Together.
Love it. Love Tina Turner. This is sort of signifies her comeback and you know, Private Dancer, that whole Tina Turner. That was one of the greatest, most rousing comebacks of the 80s. The 80s had so many comebacks, Bicyclelegs,
Yeah.
of artists that were in that middle age, Stevie Winwood, David Coverdale, even Eric Clapton, just a lot of those artists that were middle age, but they were right up in the pop charts. And this is the most rousing. And yeah, I love it. I think it's just a great rendition. It's got a lot of drama and
Yeah.
a lot of soul. I can't say anything wrong, anything bad about this song, and it's a
Yeah.
very worthy top 10.
Yeah. No, it's a great version of it. And what even by 1983 standards was a golden oldie.
Yeah.
And she
Al
rips it
Green,
up.
I believe, isn't it? Al Green.
Yes.
Yep.
So she rips it up. She does a wonderful version of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got much more to add from what you already said. It's really good.
Yeah. All right. Number 8, Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, Islands in the Stream. So we've already
Yeah.
covered that. So you know our views.
Yeah.
And here we go, another
Oh,
a Billy Joel at number 7.
number
Tell her
7.
about it.
Yeah. So this is another example of how different territories would be a little bit behind because this was the first single off Innocent Man, whereas Uptown Girl was the second single. So the UK was still playing a bit of catch up with the Billy Joel catalogue at this stage. I think Tell Her About It is a more memorable song than Uptown Girl. It's got those lovely horns in it and that sort of thing. So I know you've already said you don't really like that album at all. I have a soft spot for it because my sister and I grew up with it. It was one of the few rock records my mother owned because she was mostly into orchestral music. And we used to play that one a lot because she would let us play it in the living room, where she wouldn't let us play our records in the living room. But so we used to listen to it all the time. I think Tell Her About It's a fun song. I really like it.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the video clip. It's got Rodney Dangerfield, and it's a little
Mm.
bit got a bit of fun to it. As I said, I liked it in the day, but it's just one of those albums and songs that I've just, not so fond about anymore. All right, Status Quo. So I think that's
I know
like,
you skipped one.
oh, Thompson Twins. I'm
Yeah.
getting so excited because I wanted to talk about Status Quo. Anyway, Thompson Twins. Hold
Hold
Me
Me Now.
Now.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
nice. That's a nice song. Yeah.
it's another what I would call a prime slice of cheese. It is quite cheesy, you know, but I like it. I like the flavor of this cheese. Um, it's not my favorite Thompson Twins song by any stretch. I think they did a lot of better, sort of more up tempo songs.
Why do you think
But
it's cheese? I don't
yeah,
I don't think it's cheese. Why
no,
do you
fair enough.
say? Can you please explain?
Oh, I think it's just, I don't know. It has that real sort of 80s ballad sound to it. You know, the lush piano and the emotional vocal and, the lyric is quite mushy, love lyric. So that's probably why I would class it in the cheese category.
Yeah. I don't think it's too far out of the wheelhouse of, say, a Howard Jones or something, in that sort of ballpark. Do you think
Mm,
Howard Jones is cheesy?
he can be, yes.
Yeah. Thomas Dolby?
Yeah, not so much. I think Thomas Dolby's usually more like his up tempo stuff is really funky, and when he
Mm,
sings a ballad, it's much more from the heart, I think.
yeah.
So
But I like the arrangements of this song. There's a little bit of funk. There's a lot that's unpacking. There's a lot that's going. It's very much the production of its day. But yeah, I was actually surprised. I thought that would be more in your wheelhouse, and I appreciate, respect your opinion. But yeah, just cheesy. Yeah, that's a little bit hard to unpack. So you're not a big fan of Thompson Twins,
I
or
like them a lot, but this would not be in my top 10 Thompson Twin songs. I think I
yeah,
like a lot of more of their more up tempo songs. A big fan of their song Lies, which was an earlier song. Great song. That was the first song of
yeah.
theirs I heard.
Yeah. Do you think they streamlined their sound to become big in America? Because this was a big hit in America.
Oh yeah, I definitely think they did. I mean, you go and listen to the first Thompson Twin couple of Thompson Twins albums, which didn't really make an impact on the charts even in the UK. And they're quite experimental. They're quite sort of post-punk and bit
Mm,
spiky and edgy, and I love them. They're great.
yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely going into a more streamlined sound by this stage.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So I think it's like Death and Taxes. There's always going to be a status quo song in the UK charts around Christmas time. And this one I wasn't really familiar with. Status Quo Margarita Time. So
Mm.
please, viewers in the comments, look, seriously, I haven't really. Were you all with this particular song?
This song was another one that I had to listen to for the first time
Yeah.
when I was doing this. I'm not a huge Status Quo fan. I find them to be that sort of by the numbers boogie sort of sound. Doesn't really do like it's not terrible, but it like every Status Quo song almost sounds the same, except for this one, which is 100 times worse. It is a really bad power ballad. I love a good power ballad. This is not a good power ballad. And I don't know that power ballad is something that Status Quo should be going within 100 miles of anyway. No, this is an absolute stinker.
Yeah, I'm probably much more of a fan of Status Quo. They are the kings of boogie, meat and potatoes, rock and roll. And seriously, you could buy one of their albums and, it's true. There's a lot of their albums that sound exactly the same. And they were at their peak 70s period. This song is like their Kokomo. It's terrible. There's not a lot to recommend. It it's a real head scratch why it actually got to number 5, other than probably the punters thought, oh, it's Status Quo, without listening to it, and we better buy it at the record
Yeah,
store. So it's so pedestrian and kind of listless.
it really is.
There's just no energy to it. I know they went for a bit of a cocaine phase, but I
Mm.
think that they were doing some lines in the studio before they laid down the tracks here, Bicyclelegs. I'm really, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
no hate
it's
mail. Come on. I like Status Quo, folks, but this is not good.
no, it's as I say, the sort of band that they are, as I said, they shouldn't be going within 100 miles of a power ballad. And this song shows why.
Yeah. Anyway, we've always
Yeah,
got
no,
the
no.
opening performance of Live Aid.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 4 is Paul Young with Love of the Common People.
I've got a soft spot for Paul Young before his
Mm,
voice got shot. I think in those early first couple of albums, even going back to the Q-Tips, he was one of the best soul singers out of Britain. He just had a beautiful tonality to his voice. And I'm a sucker for all those Paul, you know, um, Young covers. And I like this song a lot,
mm,
Love of the Common People.
yeah.
I've got a soft spot for I'm going to tear your playhouse down. Every time that comes on the radio, I turn it up. I love it.
Mm,
I love it. I love, the way he puts his interpretation on some of those old soul 60s soul songs. What do you
yeah.
think?
I'm a fan of Paul Young. I like that smoky quality to his vocals. Um, this song is good. I think it would be a whole lot better if they got rid of those horrible female backing vocals. Yeah. I never liked that bit of the song.
Hey, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
his vocal on it is beautiful. It's an old standard again. It's a lovely song. Um, yeah, I would have given it a slightly different production, but I'm not a producer, am I? So, and it obviously did well. It got to number 4 on the charts. Paul Young's good, but this is not like I love things like Wherever I Lay My Hat and
Oh,
things
that's
like that.
so compelling, isn't it? That
Yeah,
was the one that really brought him to the attention worldwide. You know the bit you don't like, the yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I can't separate. I can't think of erasing that out of the song. That's so much a signature line of the song, whether you like it or not.
Mm.
It is a part of it. Has that always irritated you, that particular?
Yeah, it's just I've never been a big fan of that particular part of the song, but it's still a good song and he does a great vocal on it. So
Yeah. All right. Culture Club. So this sort of again, another Culture Club song, Victims.
yeah, this was the third single off Color by Numbers. It's their big it's got a big Broadway ballad kind of feel to it, doesn't it? Not my favorite Culture Club song, but it's all right. I mean, Boy George belts the song out. He really gives it his all, but it's a little bit sappy, and as I say, it's got that kind of Broadway feel to it, which not really my thing, but I remember liking it at the time. But yeah, of the 3 songs we're going to be talking about of Culture Club that are on these various charts, this would be the least favorite of mine of the 3, no doubt.
Yeah. No, I'm not a big fan of this song. I think it is a little bit cheesy, and it is a little bit Broadway, but it's much better than War is Stupid, which was in a year or two. Okay, well, Slade, wasn't that the feel-good comeback story of 1983? They did a comeback show at the Reading Festival. They had the song Run, Run Away. They had the album, which I can never remember the title, but it had the word kamikaze in it. And they started to even have a little bit of an impact in the American charts, Bicyclelegs, because let's face it, they influenced so many bands over there.
Hmm.
The influences were, people that were getting influenced by these bands were starting to buy their albums. What do you think of this song?
Yeah, I like Slade. I'm quite a fan of Slade. I love the 70s stuff and all that sort of thing. I loved Run Run Away when that came out. Fabulous Celtic rock kind of
Cracker of a
feel to it.
song.
This is, yeah, not very good. Again, we're getting into kind of power ballad territory, and it's again, Slade really, to me, not the sort of band that should be going into that territory. I'd rather they just did the rave ups because I think that's what they were best at. Yeah, not a great Slade song by any stretch of the imagination.
Don't you see it as a little bit of a football anthem? Don't you think, you could imagine the lads in the terraces with their beers singing this?
Oh,
Not
possibly, and that's
really.
probably
Not
why
really.
it got to number two on the
Yeah,
UK charts,
it's
but
got a
it's
bit of a
not really my thing.
yeah, it's got a bit of an anthem feel to it. But look, I don't. It's not offensive, but it's not top shelf Slade. So
No.
that's where I probably sit with it.
And
All
then
right, the number
number
one.
one, yeah, Flying Pickets with Only You.
This is one that I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
Um, so it's an a cappella group that do a version of the Yazoo song "Only You." It's sweet, it's nice, but it's not something that I would say is memorable, and I would go back to it. But um, just reading a lot of social commentary and a lot of sort of reviews of it, this definitely had a bit of it was a surprise hit in England, and a lot of people love it. There's a lot of warm feelings towards this song and this version. It's beautifully produced,
Mm.
and yeah, what do you think?
I like it. I don't think it's better than the original, but the original is just one of the all-time synth pop classics. At least they gave it a very different spin by doing it a cappella. And funnily enough, it charted higher in the UK than Yazoo's version did.
Mm,
So, but the Flying Pickets, they were quite a political band. I mean, the name the Flying Pickets comes from the fact that they would often do their singing on picket lines at
yeah,
like coal miners' strikes and things like that. So, um, yeah, I like it. I quite like a cappella music, but it's yeah, I still prefer the Yazoo version.
yeah. Well, I think people would probably go to the Yazoo version as a point of reference. But I'm not sure this song has a much of a shelf life outside Britain. It's nice, but I would always go to the Yazoo version because I just think just the arrangements and the production on that song are just so sublime,
Mm,
and it introduced the world to Alison Moyet,
yes.
and that's not a bad thing. All right, well there you go, UK top 10. So what's Bicyclelegs' pick out of the 10?
Ooh, I don't think there's as much great stuff to choose from in this UK top 10 as there was in the US top 10. Um, even though Say wasn't a great song, I'd probably pick that over most of this UK stuff. Um, I will probably go with Tina Turner, Let's Stay Together.
Yeah, well, I'm not deliberately copying you, but I'd say the same thing. Tina Turner, Let's Stay Together. And just to be contrarian, Hold Me Now. Thompson Twins,
Mm.
just to be a narc on Christmas Day. All right, let's get to the homeland, Australia.
All right.
So I have sent Bicyclelegs an authentic countdown, which was the music show of the day, top 50 single sheet. So we're
Yeah.
actually looking at a particular flyer that was at every record store at the counter every week, and I would
Yeah.
get it and have a look at it and study it. So starting at number 10, Culture Club with Karma Chameleon. What do you
So
think of
yeah,
this song?
this was the second single. So you can see we were behind the UK, but we were ahead of the US as far as the Culture Club release schedule
Yep.
goes. This is the cheesiest Culture Club song. You know, you hear it in ads these days. There's a cruise line that's using it in ads at the moment. And but I still have some fond memories of this song when it first came out. The film clip is really colourful and tells a nice little story about a guy who cheats at cards and all this sort of thing. And it's a guilty pleasure. I know in my heart of hearts that it's maybe not a great song, but it makes me happy. So
Well,
there
if it
you
makes
go.
you happy, it makes me happy. And sometimes there's songs you've just got to forgive, and
Yeah.
it goes in that category. I don't think it's their best song. I think out of all of their hit singles, Do You Really Want to Hurt Me is probably one of their best. So yeah, look, yeah, Karma Chameleon, I think it's okay. I don't think it's my favorite Culture Club song. All right, go to number
Okay.
9.
Number 9. Well, this is bursting into the charts. It was number 41 the week before, and it's number 9 this week. And it's Original Sin by In Excess. So I'm representing there. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this one?
Nile Rodgers, it was talking about interracial relationships. It was groundbreaking, should have been a huge hit in America, but because of the controversial subject matter, it didn't get played. I think even the MTV banned the film clip. Went to number 1 in Australia. I love it. I love the whole album. The Swing, I think that's one of my favorite In Excess album. I kind of oscillate between that and what's the album? Listen Like Thieves.
Yeah.
Between those two, I think that they were really hitting their sweet spot in that sort of new wave post-punk synth pop type of sound. I love it. I think it's great, and it's got John Oates on backup vocals.
Yeah.
What do you think of this song?
Oh, it's a classic. I mean, it's just one of the great In Excess singles. And the Swing is a great album. I'll tell you, my personal favorite is actually the album just before it, Shabu Shabar. Love that album. But this is a wonderful single. And yeah, Nile Rodgers gives it a great production. And it should have been massive in the US, but the radio stations weren't going to touch it with a barge pole, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's probably one of my top 5 favorite In Excess singles. Not necessarily my top 5 In Excess favorite songs, but one of their best singles, I think.
Yeah. I recently did a show about with Ryan Gavalier about top 10 Nile Rodgers songs, and somebody wrote on the YouTube clip, wouldn't it have been fantastic if Nile Rodgers actually produced the whole of The Swing? It said it was like a marriage made in heaven on that particular track, and I tend to agree. That would have been really interesting to see what Niles would have done with the band over a whole album. What do you think about that?
It would have been interesting. I don't think they had the budget for it, and I think that was the big reason they didn't do that. But yeah, it would have been interesting. But I mean, still, it's a wonderful album, The Swing, whoever's producing it.
Absolutely. Okay, Twist of Fate, Olivia Newton-John. So this was off the Flopperoonie movie, which was kind of their follow-up to Grease. So they was an Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, and unfortunately, this was a bit of as I said, a bit of a box office disaster. What do you think of the actual song?
I actually quite like it. I went and saw this movie when it came out. I'm ashamed to say, because it was terrible. But the soundtrack to it actually wasn't too bad. It had a good Chicago song on it. And it had this song, which I think is a really good. I love it when Olivia goes up tempo. And this is a really good song. It's probably one of my favorite songs of hers from the 80s.
Yeah, I agree. I like it, and it's probably the best thing about that whole package, the whole Twist of Fate thing, is the actual title song. And I think this was her last hit in maybe America, Australia, or the UK. I'm pretty sure she didn't have many hits. They started to dry up after this song. I like it a lot. It's very
Mm,
up tempo, as you said, very vibrant. For me, if you like the pop, I think her peak pop wise for me has always been a Xanadu,
mm.
like Magic, and those collaborations with ELO and Jeff Lynne. I think that was probably my sweet spot for ONJ.
Yeah, another questionable movie with a great soundtrack.
It's a guilty pleasure. I think I think Xanadu, you can get more out of that being such a bad movie than Twist of Fate, because that's kind of bad and boring, but Xanadu
Mm,
is kind of bad, but yeah, it's fun. You can watch it.
yeah.
Oh,
All right. So
look
number
what's coming up.
seven,
Oh,
yeah, Listening by Pseudo Echo. Now, this is a song that a lot of our overseas viewers probably don't know. And if you don't, go and listen to it right now because, well, as soon as this video is finished, because it's a wonderful song. Don't you agree?
great. It's a great song. It's
Yeah.
Pseudo Echo's best song, in my opinion. They basically played this on the major music show of the day, Countdown, without a recording contract. So Molly Ian Meldrum, who's like the pop Savani in Australia, saw them live and, you know, went backstage and said, I want you to appear on Countdown. And they were one of the very first bands to appear on that show without a recording contract.
Mm.
Needless to say, they got signed up pretty quickly. It's just so damn catchy. It's got a hook that hooks you in. It's just, yeah, look, Brian Cannon, who's the lead singer, he's wearing his, John Fox or Midger influences on his sleeve from Ultravox. It's got a bit of Duran Duran. It's got a bit of Japan. Um, you name it. What was happening in the clubs and what was happening in Europe is definitely in this song, but it's just so catchy. And I don't think Bicyclelegs that they ever put out a song as good as this one.
I don't know. There's some of the songs on that album, I think they're right up there with this one because it's such a great album too. But this was their debut single, you know? What a way to announce yourself to the world. And, Australian bands weren't doing this sort of new romantic sound until Pseudo Echo came along. They really weren't because it wasn't the sort of band that you could really, sort of music you could go and play in the pubs, You'd get beer bottles thrown at you because they wanted to hear the Oils and the Angels and stuff like that. But it was a brave thing for them to do considering the Aussie music scene, but it
Yeah,
paid off for them in spades because it was a huge hit.
absolutely. Well, there was a changing of the guard in pub rock where there were a lot of those countdown pop bands were starting to play the clubs. And you had a sort of late teen, early adult audience that were actually going to the pubs to see this. So I do remember Pseudo Echo in those early years playing a lot of the beer barns that were frequented by the choir boys, Spy versus Spy, Cold Chisel, Midnight Oil, and selling out those beer barns. It just catered to a different type of audience.
Mm.
I'll put a question to you, and I don't know this for a fact, but another band that was very new romantic and had a monster hit with Send Me an Angel, Real Life. Did they come slightly before Pseudo Echo? Because I'm just thinking, was Pseudo Echo the ones that kind of kicked off that new
Yeah,
romantic? Um,
we around about the same time. I think it was around 1983. So it was very
yeah,
much neck and neck, I think, those two bands.
both Melbourne bands too. So maybe there
Yeah,
was something in the water there. There was another band, Kids in the Kitchen, that I
yeah.
always found I'd put them in the bucket. They were kind of like Australia's answer to Spandau Ballet, maybe.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
funny you should mention them because on this chart, they're at number 11 with
if
their
only.
debut single, Change in Mood, which is also a wonderful song.
Yeah. This was a very fertile period for Australian music, wasn't Bicyclelegs? A lot
Yeah.
of, I mean, if you look at just so many wonderful songs, we could probably do a separate show, top 50 singles. But
Yeah.
anyway, we'll keep things moving.
Number 6. Yeah, we've got Reckless by Australian Crawl.
Well, this
Speaking
is
of
their,
Australian music.
oh, this is their best song, in my opinion. It's a masterpiece. And just so, I mean, if you think Australian Crawl were that good, fun type garage rock band or surf rock band, you've got James Rain, who's got the chisel movie star looks, and you've got all the other characters in the band. This was something that was kind of deep, intellectual. Lyrically, it was, you know, much much more deeper than a lot of the sort of pap or the pop music that was in the charts. And, if you look at it lyrically, it's about drug addiction. And I've had a few people that have sort of said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not about drug addiction. But you look at the lyrics and it's about somebody that's going on a ferry across Manly to get a hit. And he's relating this experience of traveling on the ferry to some of the explorers like Mawson going in,
Yeah.
exploring the South Pole. And it's just such an interesting, creative song. Sonically, it's very spare, it's stripped back. And it's got a wonderful vocal by James Rain. A lot of people, make poke fun at James with his drawl, but I just think he really puts in a mighty fine vocal on this track. What do you think
Yeah.
about it?
Oh, well, look, we did a show on Australian Crawl with Steve Schnee on your channel. Go and check it out if you haven't. Um, Australian Crawl did some great albums, but to me, the Semantics EP that this comes off is the best thing they ever did. All 4 songs on that EP to me are just absolute stunners. This is no exception. As you say, musically, it's very sparse. Lyrically, it's open to interpretation. It's kind of an impenetrable lyric until you really, really dig deep into it. He seems to be mixing all these little metaphors and allusions to things and not coming to the point of it. But I agree with your interpretation of it. I do think it is about sort of drug use and all that sort of thing. But it's just one of it was their only song that went to number 1 on the
Yes.
Australian charts, and deservedly so, because it's just a brilliant piece of work.
Yep. All right. Well, number 5 is Red Red Wine by UB40. And by Jingo, UB40 were such a huge act in Australia and New Zealand for that matter. Probably there were more fans in these waters than the UK for that matter.
Hmm.
What do you think of this song?
I'm not a fan of this song. I'm not a big fan of UB40. I quite like reggae. I don't like the way UB40 does reggae. I feel like it's very
Beige.
almost, yeah, it's almost like, like somebody had this idea of what they think reggae sounds like and they came up with UB40.
Mm,
It doesn't have the soul of a Bob Marley or a Peter Tosh
mm.
or anything like that. It's a good song. I mean, it's written by Neil Diamond. It's a cover version of a Neil Diamond song. And it's a good song, but I don't like the way they do it at
Well,
all.
it
Never
relates.
liked it in the day, and I still don't.
Yeah. It reminds me of high school. There was a group of people in my year, and they used to love reggae, and they'd, have these UB40 t-shirts, and they'd do the checkers, like what they do with their school uniform is they do black and white checkers, and it was sort of like you had the headbangers, you had the people that liked their cold chisel, and then you had these people that like ska and reggae, and they were always pumping up the tires with UB40, and it just made me not like them, made me quite dislike this band. I've always found them to be quite beige and boring. And if you want ska music at all, I'd always go to the specials every time.
Yeah, or Madness.
Madness,
Yeah.
a little bit more creative, and got to be. I mean, their biggest hits have been covers over
Mm,
here. When you think about it, like "I Got You, Babe."
yeah.
That was another phenomenal track that was just. It was god awful, but it just
Mm.
that sort of hogged the charts forever.
Probably the worst thing that Chrissy Hind ever put her name to.
Yeah. Do you like the original by Neil Diamond?
Of Red Red
Red,
Wine.
Red,
Yeah,
Red Wine. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's a good song. I don't mind early Neil Diamond. I think Neil Diamond gets a bad rap because he did get very saccharine and sappy in the 70s, but some of his 60s stuff is just really good pop music, you know?
Yeah. When do you think he jumped the shark? I think it was that Seagull
Yeah,
soundtrack.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull soundtracks a popular point for to say that.
Isn't that funny? Those early songs, and people forget he was like a songwriter for the Monkees. He was um he was a phenomenal songwriter. Hot August Night, is that in the Bicyclelegs collection? I think
I
every two Australians own that a copy of that and Whispering
I
Jack. I know you don't have Whispering Jack, but
oh no, no, not a John Farnham fan. But I probably did have a copy of it at one stage. I don't know if I still do have a copy of Hot August Night, but there's some great stuff on that. It's a really lively live album.
yeah, maybe the next $10 album channel challenge on Rock Daydream Nation. You'll look at this. I got the pristine version. All right. Well, this is so from tracks songs 4 to 1. We've already covered them, so we can just rattle through those.
Yep.
Say, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson at number 4. Uptown Girl at number 3 by Billy Joel. Islands in the Stream, Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, number 2. And the number 1, our song was Lionel Richie and All Night Long, in brackets, all night.
Yes.
So here's a tough one. What is your pick out of the top 10?
Of
Bicycle
the
Legs
top 10,
pick.
I don't think this is a tough one at all, actually. I'd definitely go with Original Sin. I mean, listening would be right up there too, and Reckless. It's all the Australian stuff is the best stuff on this. Maybe I'm being parochial there, but I think the Australian stuff on this chart is the best stuff.
I'll pick Listening.
Mm.
I would say Listening. Number 2 would be Reckless, and just behind Original Sin. And it's all the Australian stuff. All right. Well, there you go. That was a lot of fun. Top 10 Australia. Now, I'm going to be a little bit cheeky. And I just told Bicyclelegs at the start of the episode, I'm going to refer to a Kerrang, which was a heavy metal weekly magazine from the UK, and they did a top 5 album charts from 1983. And we'll just look at the top 5 albums and just get your reflections, if any, if I may.
Yep.
So, starting off at number 5 is Holy Diver Dio. Any thoughts on that?
Ah, just a classic of the heavy metal genre, isn't it? I mean, just a wonderful album. What again? You know, Dio had been around for a while. He'd been with Rainbow, then he'd been with Sabbath,
Mm,
and now he was, had his own band with his name on it. And again, what a way to announce yourself to the world as your new band. It's a great. Those first 3 or 4 Dio albums, I think, are all absolutely stunningly good.
yeah, look, I agree with everything you've said. It introduced Vivian Campbell to the world, and he was one of the hottest guitarists. Um, Wonderful, wonderful band. What artist has 3 masterpieces in their sort of their discography? I mean, Rainbow Rising. It's one of the all-time great hard rock albums. Heaven and Hell. It's a great album that single-handedly resurrected the Black Sabbath name, and Holy Diver. I love the album cover. In the day, I always got a little bit scared, with the
Mm.
demon and the devil. And I love Dio's take on it. Which one is actually the devil? And yeah, I
Yeah.
just thought that was quite interesting. So, but it's a punchy, straight between the eyes rock album. It's got Dio's vocals are just sublime, and the band is so tight. And yeah, it was actually featured on that Dave Grohl feature called Sound City. There was a studio outside
Mm.
LA that was very famous where Fleetwood Mac and a lot of artists did, recorded a lot of their great albums, and they did a little bit of a feature. Dio was featured, the band, um, in that particular documentary, and it's worth catching up. All right, number four, No Guts, No Glory, Molly Hatchet. I don't know much about this band.
Mm.
Looking at the album cover, it looks like it's the OK Corral. Do you know anything about Molly Hatchet?
No, I've heard, people like Pete Pardo and Martin Popov talk about them, but I've never listened
Mm,
to a note of Molly Hatchet, so I wouldn't know what their
yeah,
sound is like. I mean, I believe
Southern
they're
rock.
sort of
Yeah.
southern rock kind of thing, but with a harder edge than, say, a Leonard Skinner or something like that. But yeah, I don't really know anything about them at all, so I've never heard any of this, so I can't sort of tell you any more than that.
Okay. Number three is Lick It Up, Kiss.
Mm. This is one of my favorite Kiss albums. This early '80s period of Kiss is this one and Creatures of the Night, probably my two favorite Kiss albums. Um, this is obviously the one where they took the makeup off, it had that very sparse white cover with the four of them on it. But I love the stuff that Vinnie Vincent did with Kiss. Absolutely love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this album too, and I think Vinny actually gave them a an injection, a creative injection. And I mean, a lot of people criticize Vinnie Vincent with his guitar pyrotechnics being way over the top with Vinnie Vincent's Invasion, but I think it's evident that Paul and Gene gave him a template and said, "Don't go outside the parameters," and
Mm.
it actually works. But you can't deny Vinnie Vincent wrote some really decent songs, and I just think Kiss were on the ropes. Creatures of the Night is a better album because I rank that very high in the discography, but commercially, maybe it was the gimmick of people actually looking at the album cover and seeing them, without the makeup for the first time. It definitely gave them a bit of a commercial boost. You got to admit, when you saw this album or saw Kiss for the first time or saw the album, did you study it and just go, look at it?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think it was more the video clip for me,
Yeah,
and seeing them without the makeup on and in,
yeah,
well, not quite street clothes, but certainly not costumes the way they had
yeah.
before. They were wearing sort of normal people clothes, as it were, even if it was the sort of, latex and spandex, I mean, and that sort of thing. But
Mm.
yeah, it was definitely, but the songs came through for me.
Oh, like, Million to One. What a great song.
Mm.
So many great songs on this album. All right. Number two, this was a phenomenal hit, and it's actually gone diamond platinum in America. Eliminator, ZZ Top. What do you think of
Mm.
this album?
Well, I mean, this was my introduction to ZZ Top. The first ZZ Top song I ever heard was Legs, and I mean, this has got what Sharp Dressed Man on it as well, and Give Me All Your Lovin', and yeah, I mean, uh, now that I've gone back and listened to the sort of ZZ Top discography that came before this, it definitely wouldn't be even in my top five favorite ZZ Top albums. But at the time, it was, and what an image they had too. It was so different from what you were seeing in the '80s. These two guys with the big long beards and the cowboy hats, and they're all wearing the sunglasses, and they have the fancy uh, car and all that sort of thing. It made great MTV, and I think that's why it was so incredibly successful. It was good old rock and roll with a little bit of synthesizer thrown in, as seasoning. But then you had these great film clips and all that sort of thing, and that's what put it way over the top, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my introduction to ZZ Top as well, with those, Sharp Dressed Man and Legs. It was basically a merging of electro synth music, synthesizer sequences, synth drums with boogie rock, blues rock, introduce them into such a wide pop audience. And they probably lost a lot of their original sort of blues, hard rock audience, Bicyclelegs. I mean, that hardcore, and picked up a whole new audience and
Yeah,
probably weren't able to get back those hardcore fans for a considerable period of time.
yeah, but I mean,
Afterburner was more of the same, even
yeah,
more synth.
yeah, but I mean, who needed that old audience when you had an audience that would buy 10 million copies of your album?
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so the next one is, well, number one was Def Leppard and Pyromania.
Yeah, probably the last decent album they did. Um, Everything after that, I mean, even this one's starting to get overproduced. And then after that, it was just, you know, ridiculously overproduced. Would it take 4 years to record Hysteria or something like that? And I mean, obviously they had the tragedy with Rick Allen, all that sort of thing. But yeah, Pyromania. I mean, it's a good album, but I feel like for me, Def Leppard, they started off well, and then it was diminishing returns after that. But that's
Yeah.
just my sort of view on it.
I think this is their best album. I'd probably disagree, and I think it had the perfect rock, had enough rock crunch and riffs. It was I mean, I think that Mark Lang was the architect behind their sound, and he wanted to have a band that sounded like AC/DC with the riffage, but with more melody and more harmonies. So it was like a merging between something that may be a little bit AOR, but have that AC/DC rock crunch.
Mm,
There's a lot of great songs on this album. Like Photograph is one that I always gravitate to, and I saw them live, and they sound fantastic. They've still got it, comparative to a lot of bands of their vintage. But I think for me, this was the sweet spot, and they love Australia. Even in the early days, they were playing, coming out. I mean, they were touring America and selling out Madison Square Gardens, but they'd come over here and play Coogee Bay Hotel and try to convert the masses over here, and even played Narara Rock
yeah,
Festival on a bill with Talking Heads, Eurythmics, and a few others to boot. So they weren't shy of. They never ignored these parts down here, and I'll always tip my hat, and I've always got a soft spot for Def Leppard. So that
yeah.
was the number one. Alrighty. So out of those five, what would be your pick?
Uh, it'd be Holy Diver. I mean, it'd be a toss up between that one and Lick It Up, but I think Holy Diver is the highest quality of those albums.
Okay. I'd either go Eliminator or Pyromania. One of those two. That would be my pick.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Well, that's been fun. We've covered a few top 10 lists around the world going back to December 1983. Please check out Bicyclelegs channel. Lots of content. You'll be pumping out some shows over the January, I would imagine. You're
Yeah,
not going on a sabbatical?
yeah, no, just a couple of days before this one comes out, we should be having I recorded a video of my top 10 favorite prog Christmas songs.
Right.
So that should be fun.
Okay, no worries. And you'll be doing a top albums of 2023?
Yep, that'll be coming out the next week after this. So
Fantastic. Right. Well, tell us what you thought of the charts of 1983. Did you agree with our picks, or are we a little bit too critical? Did we go a little bit too hard on Status Quo and Cliff Richard? Should we have given a bit more love to Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers? Look, it is Christmas. Maybe we should have been a little bit less Scroogey, but we call it as we see it. That's what we do. One thing's for sure, you will see Bicyclelegs and myself on shows in Rock Daydream Nation in 2024. Please like and subscribe, click the bell, and you'll see us very soon on the channel. Cheers.
Merry Christmas.